We're here. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call our meeting to order, and we'll start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Have the clerk please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Trustee Petrucci?
Here.
Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Germain?
Here.
Trustee Kalani?
Here.
Treasurer Horning?
Here.
Clerk Hopkins here. Supervisor Fountain?
Here.
We have quorum of the board. We also have President Township Manager James Wood.
Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of our meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Treasurer Horning. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 5, call to the public. Anybody that called to the public this evening?
It's your opportunity to talk. You can talk.
Can ask about anything you'd like. Being nobody at call to the public, we'll move on to item number 6, which is approval of our consent agenda. So moved. Motion by Trustee Harper, second by Trustee Petrucci. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 7 is a public hearing. This is for Ore Valley Drive. It's a private road special assessment district where the residents have asked us to consider a special assessment. This is a public hearing for the resolution of determination. And with that, James, do we need to have any other input on that other than it's the public hearing opportunity to say what any information for?
Yeah, I can give a brief overview if you want to open a public hearing before or after that. Or
I'll move to open the public hearing.
support.
A motion by Treasurer Horning, second by Trustee Petrucci. All those in favor say aye. Aye. The public hearing is open.
I'll keep it very brief. This is about as straightforward as a project for SAD as you can have. We have received petitions of some 80% of the residents, this is an opportunity for any of those residents who all did get notice of it, would like to have any input to the board before they proceed further with the special assessment process.
If you would like to come forward, while we ask you to state your name and address for the record. Anybody here for the Ore Valley SAD?
Well, for the people in the audience, we probably want to know what a SAD is. A special assessment district, meaning people are petitioning to be taxed so their road can be fixed or replaced. So when we talk about a special assessment district, that's what an SAD is referring to.
Thank you.
I was going to say, what it is we're actually financing it for them, so they all don't have to put the money out of their pocket today to get their road paved. We're going to pay for it, and then they can pay us back over time.
Did you have any comment? No comment? Last call for public comment? Being none, entertain a motion to close the public hearing. So moved. Support. Motion by Trustee Petrucci, second by Trustee Kalani. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
So if it's Germain, actually,
Was it? Yeah. Well, it was close.
If it pleases the board, we do have a resolution of determination then to continue with the process. This would be step 2 of 4 in the special assessment process, and we've offered that for your consideration.
And James, will there be another public hearing?
There will be before it's said and done.
30 or 45 days? Is there a timeline?
Well, after the assessment roll is confirmed, there's a 45-day window for appeals. But
okay. Is there any other discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the resolution.
I'll move resolution of determination to make private road improvements, approval of revised plans and estimate of costs, final determination of special assessment district, and preparation of the special assessment roll.
Support. Motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Trustee Harper. Is there any discussion? Being none, I'll have the clerk please call the roll.
Supervisor Fountain?
Yes.
Clerk Hopkins, yes. Treasurer Horning?
Yes.
Trustee Kalani?
Yes.
Trustee Germain?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
yes.
Trustee Petrucci?
Yes.
Resolution carries.
Thank you. Item number 8 is pending business. We have no pending business this evening. We have no new business this evening. We have board reports, and we will start with our second meeting in May with Trustee Harper.
No report.
Trustee Germain?
No report.
Trustee Petrucci?
Yes, I would like to thank the Hartland Area Community Council and a whole lot of people who volunteered their time to bring this Memorial Day celebration to Hartland. They put together this booklet. If you don't have a copy of this, they're free. All you students out there, there's a whole bunch of them right out on the table in the lobby. Take one home and read it. There's a lot of really good information about Hartland in here, about why Memorial Day is so important. And you'll learn about our Grand Marshal, too, and he's sitting right there.
Right there.
And you'll learn why he's our Grand Marshal and why he's so deserving of that, that you'll see him in the parade. But just want to thank the Community Council for putting that together. I know how difficult it is to put a parade and put a celebration day together. I did it for 3 years on the fire department, and 3 years before that I co-chaired it. So I know the work that's involved. And we have some really good people in this community that make our community a better place to live. And it's a way of celebrating with a small town event with a very big meaning. So I just hope everybody takes the opportunity not just to live in Hartland, but to experience Hartland. Take one of these home and read it. It's really good. You'll like it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Clerk Hopkins?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the members of the township staff that volunteered their time to help in the large item cleanup day and shredding event that took place last Saturday, and certainly would like to thank the schools for letting us use their parking lot to put on that event. Over 350 residents took advantage of that opportunity. It was a great turnout, and it didn't rain on us, so that was nice. And as Trustee Petrucci just mentioned, Memorial Day this weekend. In that booklet, you'll find a schedule of the events as well. Luminary walk starting on, first thing is Sunday evening, and then the pancake breakfast at Village Elementary in the morning, and then the parade starts at noon. There's a ceremony in Hartland Cemetery at 11, so a lot of great stuff coming up this weekend. That's it for me.
Well, Larry, aren't you soliciting people to work as poll workers?
Yeah, we have some things in the paper and on our website. We are looking, thank you very much, Joe, for people that are interested in working elections. We have an election coming up in August and another one in November. It involves attending a class that's put on by the county for training, and the certification is good for 2 years. And once you're certified, you basically can work anywhere in the state as an election worker. We pay $9 an hour to a election worker and $12 for a chairperson. So you can find the application on our website or here at the Township Hall. You have to be 17 years old.
Or older.
Right.
Larry, one quick question. How many volunteers did you mention that helped out this weekend? There were several.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really count.
There were dozens, though. Dozens of people assisted with that, which was
That was really well done.
very, very well done. Thank you. 16? Thank you. I know you were a big part of that. Treasurer Horning?
No report.
And Trustee Colini?
I have no report.
And I just wanted to say thanks. At our last meeting, we had a discussion with Commissioner Domas, and all those questions have been forwarded to the county board pertaining to the road patrol, and we expect to hear something back from them for clarification. And James, we probably see something there maybe by our next meeting, you would think?
I haven't heard
anything
the
yet.
timeline for response.
Okay. No more board questions, comments? Manager Wickman, your report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Really just one highlight, and happy to answer questions. The last couple of weeks have been dominated by the Safer Roads and Pathways, several public meetings and several homeowners association meetings, and if there are more HOAs at our meeting, we're happy to come out and answer questions on that. Great turnout, a lot of good feedback, very constructive, and I think there's some good things for the task force to chew on. They'll be getting together June 4th, and it's just it's been great to be a part of this engagement with residents. We're doing it the right way, whatever the outcome. So thank you for that. Otherwise, happy to answer any other questions from the reports.
Thank you. And item number 12, this will be our information and discussion this evening. 12A is our 2-year capital improvement plan. We've gone over this at several meetings, and I believe manager is looking for us to at least adopt this evening, and not adopting any financial element to it. We've already done that for 2013 and 14, but this would be a strategy set forward as we go down the road and starting to put some of the pieces of the plan together.
This is a planning document. It helps us to, we try to be proactive on the staff side as we look out into future years and get prepared for the next budget cycle to know kind of what is on the mind of the board in the way of priorities for capital projects. Understanding, like we talked last time, that some of this is likely going to change through the pending Parks and Recreation plan, as well as based on the outcome of the Safer Roads and Pathways initiative. So not making any concrete decisions, but at the same time need to know, the board's level of support for these things enough to plan accordingly and not be making these decisions during the next budget cycle, to start next spring. Just trying to
put that up on the board right now?
Yeah, we can. I know there was a lot of information there. We had a lot of discussion on it last time. And the board wanted to chew on that some more. Really, I'm not sure what questions or further thoughts the board had wanted to go into. I know we talked about some of the things that we weren't sure, whether they matched up with all of our strategic plan or to what extent they might change during the Parks and Rec plan. There was some discussion about the community events aspect and where does a potential amphitheater fall into that. There were I know some board members advocated for some projects more highly than others, and maybe you wanted to have discussion to maybe move some projects up or down. Just the meat of it is obviously the project list and the timing for those. And the best reference I like is the...
What page is that?
It's the very last page that summarizes it, I think, the best. Try to zoom in here. Where it kind of cash flows in the various years for those projects. And as we discussed, the way it ended up was favorable in that we're not really spending down that capital projects fund very far, and that's good for a number of reasons. It does spread out the projects a little bit. Again, these can change in the future. Just I'd like to know if this accurately reflects the next 2 years, 2015 and 2016, where the temperature of the board is today.
Well, so it seems that at our last meeting, it seemed to me I recall Trustee Kalani or or Jermaine mentioning something about moving the benches into this year or something. Did somebody say something like that? I mean, what's the,
We were waiting for, I think it was Mr. Schmidt at the high school.
Right.
Was going to be working with some students to perhaps come up with some design and building opportunities.
That could take all of next school year to see if it pans out or not, honestly. I mean, that's a timeline. If that's what you're looking for in a lower cost approach, you got to give it some time. The way this approach takes is assuming that doesn't happen, then yes, in 2015, we go out and just buy the benches. But there had been interest in finding a way for that to be a project of another round. If you want it.
Wasn't Bob weren't you in communication with Mr.?
Yes.
That's not going to happen this summer, though.
There's just not a lot of school right now.
No, I know that.
But it's a project that's on the radar for next fall.
Yeah. I think he's going to incorporate that as part of his curriculum going into the fall. And then I think we'll probably, very shortly, we should have, presentations in the late fall, and then 2015 would put us right on schedule.
Right. And if for whatever reason that didn't, or we didn't go all that we needed, this anticipates that we'd fill in the rest of the need by just the traditional route. Now the cost of that is that, for this year, for this summer, there will not be benches out there. We understood that. That was the payoff of taking that approach. If the board wants to change
Since
that.
we're quite a ways down the road, that we should allow the schools to have an opportunity to take on this project starting in the fall. That would be my thought on this. Does anybody opposed to that? Matt, are you comfortable with that? I think it's important for those that are in the audience to understand where these dollars are general fund dollars. We do not have any millage or any funding coming from the township itself. These are excess dollars that are in our general fund on an annual basis. The parks that we just worked on last year, those dollars came out of this same fund for construction of those last year. So we take a strong look at what's the most important part of our community as we go forward. There's some other elements that could impact this. One is the sheriff's department and road patrols, how that goes forward. Number two would be if the millage for the road improvement were to pass or fail this fall, that could have an impact on where we allocate the dollars. So this is actually a fluid document. We have approved the first line item that includes the village sidewalks, the trash cans, the guardrail project, which I believe is completed at Springer Field, and the memorial is a park add-on that is potentially going to go here at Settlers Park. Trustee Petrucci, do you have any updates on that? Trustee Petrucci spearheaded this and received a grant from Enbridge to help assist perhaps in that area.
Well, Bob can probably fill in more than I can, but we are finalizing the numbers. We'll be meeting with an architect within the next week or two. Have a committee meeting shortly thereafter. Our goal is to stay in that $50,000 range, which was $25,000 was provided through the grant. We are very, very close to that number. We are within reaching distance of that number as we see it now. We just want to firm those numbers up a little bit more before we come back to the board.
Okay. So I don't know if there's any other comments or add-ons to where we are. Some of the bigger line items, when we look at concession stands, we look at perhaps the amphitheater. It would be very difficult for the township to be able to do that on its own. Be looking for corporate sponsorships, other organizations to get behind projects like that would make them sustainable. Again, we don't have a funding opportunity to do that. We're not seeking that. We're just using the resources that we have to the best of our ability to make Hartland a great place and a great place to raise a family, and We feel these elements are those that will enhance our community. So are there any other comments on this evening? If not, I would entertain.
Well,
What do you-
I do have a comment before.
Okay.
I mean, I still have issue with the concession stand and restrooms for $210,000. I mean, given what you just said, I mean, if that's the only way but that is happening is if we find partners. But this plan that's presented here and the cash flow model underneath it, it contemplates us cash flowing this out of our capital improvement funds. And I just...
Well, it's very similar to what we just talked about with the park benches. We're working with the schools. We have an allocated amount, but we don't think it's going to be that much if we can get the schools to be on board. Is that
Well, this isn't a, we're approving the capital improvement plan. Anything that comes before us, we still have to approve, right?
Yeah, you're still, when we actually go to appropriate in the budget, you have to approve the appropriation, and then when we actually enter into a contract to buy something, you would have to approve it. It is fair what he's saying. I mean, if you don't reasonably expect that the plan 3 years out is to pay for that out of the capital projects fund, we ought to make a notation to that effect or something in the plan that that project does only happen based on XY percentage leveraging or something. Because otherwise, these do presume that we are going to use capital project funds for them if it doesn't happen any other way. Having said that, too, we know that the Parks Rec plan that we will be doing the next year is going to look at all these things, and the CIP for the Parks Rec plan will be in much more detail and talk about the contingencies that, if there are any needed, that only happens based on XY partnership or whatever. But if the board, if the consensus of the board is that project doesn't happen if it's fully funded by the township, then we ought to make a note of that here.
I agree with Larry.
agree with Larry with?
But, I'm not even sure, is that what they want out there, that park? Are we planning on doing any kind of...
Well, the Parks and Rec plan would do that,
Right.
yeah. I mean, would make sure that stakeholder groups have, on the same page with what the next plan would be, yeah.
So if we put the caveat based on Parks and Rec plan, that's going to be done before that, based on and partnerships, without putting a number, would that satisfy your
I
concerns?
think just putting a notation in there that this is, subject to stakeholder input and
We can add a note that, we have on some already, a note C on really all of these second and third year park projects that, one, it's pending the Parks and Rec plan update, and two, that there's an assumption that at least several of those projects will happen through other fundraising partnership or grant efforts. So we can add that as a note.
that'd be fine. I think
Yeah, I'm
that'd be
okay
good.
with that. I don't know, I guess I think in my mind, too, that you brought up, you'd like to see more community events starting to happen and things like that. And to me, that does talk of maybe having an amphitheater, a place where we can have battle of the bands or concerts or things like that, which is more important to the community, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
And that's
one thing, I assume that the concession and restroom is out at Heritage Park, correct?
Yes.
They're already having tournaments out there. They're having soccer and lacrosse tournaments, and most likely will have, their large football scrimmage there. Those are large events. They're already having problems, I think, with parking. I mean, that's a major issue.
Right. Maybe that's more, expanding the parking lot's more important.
Isn't parking more important than
That's
that?
what we're talking about.
I'm just telling, that's why I think having a notation there that James is talking about, we may have to revise that at a future time. But certainly you need restrooms out there. You need a shelter for emergency, purposes. We need some shelters out there.
I would agree with that. I mean, when I see that, I don't think of a structure that I would,
The pavilion is separate.
and it's kind of more of a
Right.
structure.
Right.
So, I mean, that's my issue with that. I mean, Also, I don't know, I mean, not to get off topic, but, I mean, is the township really thinking that we're going to pay another $75,000 for the memorial in Settlers Park over and above in 25? I mean, I thought that was going to be kind of a fundraising effort to get that thing further down. So, I mean, maybe they might want to kick me off the committee now that I said that, but,
No, that was the intent, Larry.
yeah, I mean, and to see that we're now contemplating spending $75,000, I mean, and I know we're not approving that, but it's still kind of focuses on,
I think a notation as we have in there is, this contemplates what the budget is, but not necessarily money's coming from the township, but through other...
That would be a rough project cost, but not necessarily funded entirely by the township.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know that that's really the correct use of a capital improvement plan. I mean, it's supposed to be used for future budgeting and planning. And
No, it would be fully appropriate for CIP projects to be in there that was zero funded by the locality, but were, still a capital improvement intended to be funded by other sources, or for us to do that 50/50. And, I mean, we've got one in there already, the mountain bike path. That's a $2,000 project, but really, most of that is coming through in-kind contributions, and it's going to cost us a couple $100 for some signs. It's going to be less than $500, I'm sure. But, that's planning, and that's looking at other funding sources. So I can, I don't know if it fully addresses the issue, we can add that notation, letter C to all those parks things to say, there's a parks plan that's going to give us a better feel, and there's an assumption that a lot of these are going to come through some fundraising or other funding sources. And I could change that, too, for the Memorial Phase 2 to that same notation, if that would...
I think it should be on
it
there.
will make me feel better about
I
it.
think it should be on there.
Another related note, I know I've had some conversation with some board members when it comes to the Safer Roads and Pathways plan. You'll recall that recommendation from the task force was to double general fund investments in the roads and pathways. That number today is $80,000, so we've kind of been working off that recommendation that another $80,000 a year out of the general fund would get invested there. And over the 10-year program, that'd equal $800,000. And you could do a lot of things with that, of course, and a lot is needed. Some conversation I've had was about the idea of taking that number and rounding it up to around $1 million, $100,000 a year, investing out of the general fund to leverage that, a nice round, impactful number to go along with the road millage to be invested additionally. If there's some board interest in that, I guess I'd offer it out there as something you might want to consider, without saying whether I advocate for one or the other. But if you're inclined to do it, it would be better to know that sooner than later, because that would be integrated into the plan and be a talking point for the plan itself, that, this is in addition to a commitment to whether it be $800,000 over the 10 years or $1 million.
I support the $100,000 a year out of this to come up with another $1 million. I support that. I think the roads are more important than a lot of the things we have on here. It's number one on our survey.
If we were to increase it to $1 million,
Yeah.
why then would the Dunham Road sidewalk be in that? It's $165,000.
Well, it'd be a part of that then. That would be that'd be part of your $1 million investment, would be the Dunham Road sidewalk, or other sidewalks like that. Some of the task force is going to wrestle with this issue in a couple weeks of the pathways being in the road millage plan. We've gotten a lot of feedback about roads are more important, let the millage go to the roads. The task force and the survey data suggests there is a lot of support still, too, for the pathways. They may be looking at...
Couldn't we say then our contribution would go towards the path and sidewalk.
Brilliant idea. I mean, yeah, that's why, yeah, right. That may be something the task force, they haven't, the seed's been planted, and they're chewing on that, and we'll get into it when we meet. That may be an outcome that comes from that. Just
Anybody have a
give you
problem
heads
with
up.
that?
I think it's great.
So you would add this as a notation to our discussion this evening on this, in this document?
Yeah, we can do, exactly. In the cash flow, we'd show that, but I don't know that have I heard a consensus around that $100,000 a year.
I didn't hear anything other than 100.
Okay, all right, yeah, okay.
Can you hear the nodding?
I'll certainly pass that along to the task force, so thank you.
Okay. So with those notations,
We'll bring the final draft back to the next board meeting on the consent agenda.
fair enough. Item number 12B is in-house water system study. James, I'll turn this back over to yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. There's a lot of documentation there in the plan, or in the agenda for you to look at. I've had opportunity to answer a lot of your questions, I know. I'll try to summarize it briefly. We've dealt with a lot of issues in the 7 years that I've been here, and the water system was operating pretty well enough. It was pretty low on the list of priorities and concerns for us. Nevertheless, from the day I walked in, there was no doubt in my mind that we could operate that system with staff more efficiently and effectively, and more cost effectively. That's never been a doubt. We had other fish to fry, so to speak, and the water system was working well enough. And in fact, my interest in revisiting this issue, because if you recall, HRC looked into this back when Raleigh was here even, and we kind of confirmed our suspicions on that, but it still wasn't a priority. And all else being equal, this one wouldn't have risen up to the top for me to look at probably until next year, or maybe 2 years out. But for a number of other things that we've got going on where it makes sense to tackle this issue now. And so, we put together some analysis and numbers that, again, confirm that we can operate it. We have the capacity and the ability to do it. There's minimal upfront investments because most of the plant and the infrastructure is there, and that there would be a significant enough savings for us to seriously consider it. Because again, if there wasn't the savings there, I would certainly lean towards the contracting approach that we have been taking. And so I don't, without getting into a lot of details, I trust you've had a chance to look at, I guess I'd leave it to questions about what's been presented.
I have a lot of questions, and I know you tried to reach out to me to talk a little bit more about this. A couple of things it seems like this has been the approach for a long time to move water operations in-house, and I think sometimes we get focused that that's ultimately the goal, and then let's put together a program to move in that direction. And if we just looked at costs, it seems like it makes a whole lot of sense to bring them in-house if we're solely looking at cost. I think that what's missing from this study is two things. One, an RFP or something that should have gone out, a request for proposal, to look at other operators that may be available for that's less expensive than our current operator, United Water. I've worked with United Water at multiple capacities in my former employment, and I have some issues with some of their operations and their business model. So I am concerned a little bit that they may actually be more expensive because we haven't really gone out perhaps for a request for proposal to look at what other operators that might be out there. Number two, and I mentioned this to, I think I mentioned this to you before, why we wouldn't reach out to Oakland County Water Resources that operates multiple water systems already, has already the staff in place and equipment, and more importantly, they're close by. They operate the Hartland Township water supply system. And it just seems to me that it makes more sense that we would reach out to them to see if, and have them entertain a proposal from them to determine just exactly what would be an appropriate level of service that they could provide and the costs associated with that. I think there's some benefits of having an outside operator versus bringing it in-house. And I think while cost is one factor we look at, it's also being able to hold outside operators accountable. And we do that with a lot of contractors. When we decided we go out, when we went out for professional services in all our departments, which we haven't done in a while, we went out for requests for proposal from our legal counsel, our planners, and our engineers. And I always think that we should periodically do that because I think it forces them to sharpen their pencils. I just recently am working on a project that involves my current employer and township over sewage treatment. And the issue happens to be the cost of operating a sewage treatment facility. And lo and behold, they went out for RFP, and the very operators came down 50%. Almost 50% of what it costs to operate that system currently, because the competitor was almost 85% less expensive. So while there's been all this work put into this in-house water study, I don't think I've seen enough information to tell me whether that makes sense until there has been a lot more work on the outside to see who's available and who's competitive. And I'm somewhat reluctant to expand our workforce here at the township when there are private vendors and public vendors contractors out there that can possibly do this work for less money than what United Water is proposing. So those are my comments, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
And can you help me, maybe in the case of Oakland County Water Resources, they operated those systems with staff. Is there a reason they didn't contract it out?
They have been the operator. They don't own any of the systems.
Okay.
They're just an operator because of over time they've been able to operate the system, so they have the staff in place and they contract intergovernmental agreements with local governments to operate. So, for example, Farmington Hills, they are the water and sewer department for Farmington Hills. They operate the Farmington Hills system.
I assume those communities chose them because they were more cost-effective than a private contract.
But it's like anything else. I mean, when you apply the economies of scale, if you have less communities you operate, the more your costs are going to be, or you got to find a way to lower your overall cost. But the fact that they're operating Hartland Township's water supply system, which is very similar to ours and is less than 4 miles away, I just feel that we should be reaching out at least to look at what they have to offer. I'm not suggesting we go with them, but
sure,
we should really consider.
We can do that if that's what the board wants to do. I'll offer a couple of thoughts on that. I don't know. We can certainly do that, and I imagine one hurdle for them is going to be whether or not they're inclined to do that outside of the county. Not that they can't, but they may have their own. I'm not saying that they would.
Right. No, they would have to. They'd have to
probably get permission from the Board of Commissioners or something like that.
It would require an interlocal agreement through the County Board of Commissioners. By the way, I think I could probably handle that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's really two costs here. One is labor, and then the other question, when it comes to economies of scale, might be the equipment that we wouldn't have to duplicate, possibly. But I don't think it's perfectly clean in that just because they're over there, they're going to run over here. If they took on the system or anybody else, they are going to require a truck or two, and then, that truck to be outfitted with the tools to do the job. They're not going to just say, we'll just run the Highland truck over here, that kind of thing. But so I don't think it's maybe as simple that, because otherwise, the labor, which is the biggest piece of this, the labor is the labor. The electrical bill is the electrical bill. If the labor is labor, it's either going to take 76 hours a week to do this thing, or it's not going to. And so if somebody's undercutting somebody, my concern immediately comes to, are they devoting the amount of time necessary to maintain the system? And we've had, I don't want to paint all vendors or contractors with the same broad brush. We've had experience with that with the sewer system, and when Livingston County took it over, they found a number of corners that were cut that were to the detriment of the bottom line. Again, I don't have evidence to say that's the case here, but in any contractor relationship, there are inherent risks, and those are real risks.
You're absolutely right,
Yeah.
and having someone on staff here to make sure that they know the system, know what it takes to run the system, overseeing that is important.
Yes.
I mean, we should have somebody, and we have an engineer that we contract with, and we have our DPW director. I think they're our quality control people. They're the people we pay to make sure that those vendors that are working for us, contractors that are working for us, are not doing what you just said, undercutting, spending time on things that they shouldn't be spending time on. I think we need to take a hard look at this and find out just exactly where we stand with. Like I said, I don't think cost is the only factor that should be looked at here. It is the quality of service and what you're going to get. And while I see the numbers, and if I strictly went on numbers, I'd say have at it. But I'm very reluctant to expanding staff at this time. I just think that we need to look at this from another angle here instead of towards the goal of bringing somebody and doing it in-house. It's just my opinion.
Sure. Two more quick things on this issue. The issue, there are risks here. There are inherent risks in the contracting relationship, and these are things that we stub our toe on, not just with United Water, but with anything. I mean, we had service and responsiveness issues with the snow plowing this winter. Of course, it was a bad winter, but we had that with the previous snow plow, and we had this issue, we've run into issues operationally with United Water through multiple different operators that they've staffed in that position, and frankly, through 3 different public works directors since I've been here. Despite your best efforts, it's not the level of accountability and the level of responsiveness is just not the same as an employee-employee relationship, where you have, by very definition, and the IRS definition of a contract is you don't get to tell them to do every little thing. There has to be some autonomy there, and that's the autonomy is where you run into issues. Are these major issues? They're not major issues. They've been minor enough and operational enough that we've been happy to live with them for as long as we have, and I would be happy to live with them for a couple more years if it weren't for other things that are on our screen. Another reality here is that there is some flexibility needed within. I've talked before about we do have 2 brand new parks. We have 160 some acres of parkland that we now have responsibility for, and we have contractor relationships with Hyatt and community soccer to maintain those. We have the Hero Center that is another facility that we're responsible for. As these things build up, I've heard, we've had conversation here acknowledging, there's a day where we've got to deal with how to address those issues more responsibly. Now, I say that with some risk, and I know I've talked with some of you about, trying to keep this proposal as simple as it ought to be, and this is just really about the water system. But if we just go to another contractor, we're still stuck in the same position that if we continue to expand or grow what we got in the way of park facilities, we've got to build a whole new infrastructure around how to deal with the oversight and maintenance of those things. This puts our foot in the door in the right direction for building on that someday, and again, in a more cost-effective way. that's not a part of the proposal, but it sort of is. I have to be honest about it, and so that contracting with whomever doesn't make progress, or doesn't get us moving in the right direction there. I don't mean to distract us from the immediate issue, but having said all that, I'm happy to continue to answer questions, and of course, at the end of the day, if the board feels like they can't make a decision until we go out for RFP to other private contractors or Oakland County or whoever else, that's what we will do. I believe that, I stand by the recommendation that's in front of you, that we have enough information here to make a good, informed decision on.
Well, as I've mentioned to you before, I mean, interlacing everything you're saying is these other issues that you think you're looking at it 2 years earlier than you were, and my mind is always thinking to the stuff you just mentioned about the park business, but yet we're not really looking at the park, and we don't know that we will be able to, the amount of time that we would hire these people for. So a lot of things seem to come back to that hope that you have that this new structure would be able to fulfill without really the certainty that they will be able to fill. So I still have that concern.
James and I had a long discussion on that exact element today. Get the true costs involved, the capital improvements that are needed to do it in-house versus out, through a contractor. And we talked about that at length today. So I think those are things that we're going to be, at least from what I hear, we're going to be looking at additional information, not only just short-term, but long-term.
My biggest hesitancy, and we've talked about, is that, what the proposal on the table is that we provide 76 hours a week of dedication to the water system for something we've been contracting 60 hours for. Can we get what needs to get done in the water system done on 60 hours? That's where I'm uncertain of, because we haven't had our expectations met from that 60 hours. We're left to wonder if everything that's supposed to be getting done is getting done, and we wouldn't know that until we get into it. Certainly, having 76 hours is going to and be doing it cheaper than what 60 hours is costing us is going to leave us the room to, once we get in there, and I wouldn't expect us to take long to figure out that, okay, we can get that done in 60 or 50 or 70 hours a week. What's left would allow us to deal with low-hanging fruit of plowing the snow. Are we going to have a truck? Are we going to have a blade on it? Plow the snow over here, we're ahead of the game. Cross-connection control inspections, that's a separate deal. We already contract out to a whole different party. Operators are going to be fully, have the expertise enough to do those and be more cost-effective for those people who have to pay that fee. With that, if we end up with, 16 hours extra a week to do those things, that's easy. My concern is just to commit here and say that with 76 hours a week, we know we can, respond to Hero Center calls, things that break or cut the grass or any of these other things, until I'm suggesting taking a baby step with the water system, get that in order, and then anything else after that, we come here, we make the case, we demonstrate, that there's a cost savings or not for contracting, and we decide on a case-by-case basis. So I recognize this is not a complete proposal in that regard. I just can't ignore the difference it would make to our ability to be flexible and agile in the future.
Have you looked at all the different services that Oakland County can provide? Let's assume they can and are willing to do the work, because you mentioned cross-connections. They have a whole cross-connection unit. They have an operation and maintenance staff that is competitive with any operator out there that I know of, and they're not motivated by profit because they can't make a profit. The costs are what they're going to be. And they'll be able to identify what those costs will be by whatever proposal. They may even find some other savings in here that you might not otherwise have, that Enlo hasn't otherwise identified. So there's a whole host of questions and answers I understand what you want to do is you want to bring in new staff because you got these other ancillary activities that you can rely on them for when they pop up and take time, because that's those little fires that you got to put out. I just don't know, and that's not something that United Water's contracted to do. And I can see what your thinking is, but I think that we need to look at this a little bit more, in my opinion.
And again, if that's what the board wants, we can certainly do that. And I'll admit, I haven't looked to see what they can or can't do, because I guess I know enough to know that most of this is driven by labor costs, and I have every reason to believe that we can beat whatever labor rates that Oakland County's paying. And so, plus whatever 10% overhead they're going to tack onto it when we've got the overhead to handle it. So we can look at those numbers. I just feel like at the end of the day, we'll still end up in the same place. If that's what we need to do, that's what we need to know. I just feel confident enough in knowing what the answers to those questions are.
Well,
Go ahead, Joe.
I think it's important to note that if you were to bring someone into this capacity, that the majority of that cost would go to the water district itself, not to the township as a whole.
Sure.
So the savings would also go to that water district as well. So the cost to the township would be minimal as they do other things besides the water studies and so forth.
And only if they can do it at less expensive than what we're already paying a contractor to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that Joe has some valid points, and obviously, with his experience in the sewer and water areas, he's probably got more experience than anybody in this room. And I think that for us to make a final decision, I think we need to have that additional information to really see it in black and white where the savings would be. I don't think that'd be an unreasonable request.
Okay.
Glenn, you have any comments?
I initially was for, when Joe bringing up these other ideas, I think it's worthwhile to, to do a little bit more research before we make a final decision. I think that go along with that.
Matthew?
I always get the last word.
No, I haven't spoken yet.
Kathy and Larry do.
I think that, as a licensed professional engineer and have done a lot of water and wastewater work myself, I feel that right now our water system is probably on the border, but probably closer to the smaller side, where it would be easier for us to continue to contract out these services. I have concerns with a number of things. United Water, being a rather large company, has the ability to provide specialty people basically on a moment's notice if there's any repairs or concerns that are necessary, like mechanical repairs. And while we would pay for those, they've got electrical specialists and mechanical specialists that are available to make these quick repairs. And if we do this in-house and we're only hiring 2 operators, we don't have that capability. We'd have to outsource it anyway. And if there's going to be a time delay in getting those repairs and things done. So it's getting back to the kinds of things that Joe was talking about, that it's more than just the dollars. I also have a concern about the fact that we are apparently tied into a long-term contract with them for the maintenance of the water tower. And even if we terminate their services, we have to continue to pay that. And I wanted to get some clarification on how that was factored in.
We did that on purpose. Most of the work has already been done, and we're just paying for it on a delayed schedule. I mean, the big work of going in, repainting that tower, that was the most expensive stuff, but they spread that cost over a 5-year service agreement. And even if we were operating that ourselves, we would still contract out. That'd be a good example of where it makes sense to contract. We don't want to get in the tower painting business and maintenance business. The startup costs and the expertise required are not achievable. We don't have the capacity. We would contract that out. We still would.
But even looking at the proposed equipment to purchase, you're getting 2 one-ton trucks. I don't know why you couldn't get one one-ton truck and a pickup truck. And you don't have to duplicate all of the equipment like that. And the other thing that you did bring up that I thought about was, if we're going to be investing in all these mowers and snowplows and other things like that, we should at least consider using those on the parks and in our own location here, and there was no mention of that in here in terms of the reduction in outside fees we're paying others through the winter and so on.
It was, I'm alluding to, and I think I stated them a little more strongly tonight, my attempt was not to make the justification based on that. I wanted to start with, let's just get the water system in order, and then build on that. The opportunity to build on is there. And that may be the case with Oakland County. We can find that out. That would not be the case with United Water or Earth Tech or whoever else.
But I guess my most important point I think I would like to make is that while I know there's been a lot of effort by Enlow Engineering and Bob to put these reports together and proposals, I feel that we really should have been using some of that time to figure out how we're going to operate our parks, which have a much more broader appeal and use to the entire township residents instead of just the water treatment itself. I think that if we were expanding our water treatment system and adding new users at a very high rate, then this would be more attractive. But in our current economic situation and limited construction and building, I don't, right now, until we get more information, I think I would be opposed to this.
Kathy?
Well, I know since James has come, I've seen the professionalism of the entire township go up. I've seen his direct supervision of people and things getting done, and I do agree that there are some points here, all these points are well taken, that we should probably get the exact costs, but the bottom line is the water district and the costs keep going up, and if we can help keep those costs down for our residents, I think that's great. I see a lot of benefits to having it in-house where we would have direct supervision. I know we've had issues with, since I've been here, through the operators over there, them not being able to change it out to somebody that we really felt was good at it, and I think, if you guys want him to look into it a little more, but I don't have any fear of increasing our staff if it becomes effective and it's better for the whole district.
Larry?
I would go along with that, but I just think we need to expand a little bit more on the study and from what they've said. Is it possible that Joe and Matt could work with Bob and James to help? I mean, I don't know if, Joe, do you have any time you could help them with that? If you need it?
Putting together an RFP for, I mean, I'll let the rest of the board comment, but frankly, if that's the way we're going, even if that's going to be more work, and I would look at us probably delaying that until looking at it in the future year. Because I can't, I mean, we've put some thought and work into it at this point. If we got to go get RFPs, proposals, and go through that level analysis, it'd probably be something we'd have to delay to a future year.
I think all you need in the case of Oakland County, and Bob knows Tim Prince runs the water systems, is simply send them your specifications for your water system, the number of users, the number of, what the facilities are, and ask them for a proposal. It's a public entity, so it's not going to change. They're not going to, you know what I'm saying? They're not going to, it's going to be whatever it is, because there is no looking at, okay, I'm going to have, X number of employees, whatever. They're going to tell you, they're going to be able to say, we can manage this for you. The hours would be such and such. This is what the price will be. I don't think that's that hard to do.
Well, we're also talking about getting private contractor proposals.
Right. I'm just saying, if you want to get something from another public entity to look at this, I mean, there's alternatives to be looking at this as opposed to also private vendors. I'm not telling you whether or not Oakland County can do it or not. They have there may be some hurdles there too, but at the very least, you can get a round number, which I think this should have at the very least, this should have been explored in this report. Before coming to the report saying we want to do this in-house, because since I've been on the board, this has been a push. It was pushed by Shannon when she was here, and the board hasn't, and I agree with Matt, we're not at that size yet. If we had a lot of growth coming out, I reconsider it, but expanding our workforce right now just doesn't make sense. And for you to kind of take the attitude where, well, okay, we'll put this aside and we'll look at it another time, I just find that kind of a bad attitude about how we might look at this. I don't appreciate that. I think if you brought this to us and we've pointed out what the issues are, it needs to be taken care of.
May I ask you a question? You may not know the answer. That's okay. Do you know when the United Water contract expires? Are they on a year-to-year basis right now, or what kind of arrangement do we have with them?
If I'm not mistaken, the last one was a 5-year contract with the 1-year renewals. So service every year for renewal coming from the board. Water tower maintenance was a separate amendment, and that technically has, I believe, 3 years left, or we're about halfway through, 2.5 years. That's separate and above itself, but I believe we're 2 years out, if I'm not mistaken, maybe just over 2 years with the existing United Water operations contract, not pertaining to the tower maintenance, I should say.
If we went ahead and paid that $255,000 now that we owe, would we save over the long term as opposed to financing it for the rest of that 2.5-year period? Is that an instant way to save some money?
Not really. Quite frankly, there's an annual maintenance fee included in that where they do an inspection.
Okay.
That fee isn't 100% towards the painting, but I think the fee is somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,600 a year, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because the study that was done by Inlow says that we have to pay that full amount within 30 days of termination. So would we continue to use their services for that remaining 2.5 years to do the annual or the inspections and things like that? We're just paying for it up front?
However, if you cancel the contract, you're going to pay for the remaining maintenance on it either way. Long term, are we going to save money? No.
Well, if it's a separate contract, we're not canceling that contract,
Well,
right?
I should rephrase that. It's a separate amendment to the existing contract. So parameters that surround the operations and maintenance were separate from the actual tower maintenance.
We'd still get what we paid for. They just wouldn't allow us to spread it out over the 5 years. We'd have to pay for what we already used, and we'd still get their maintenance services for the remainder of that agreement.
Okay.
If that.
Did you have anything else?
Well, I mean, people have made a lot of good points here tonight. I mean, I certainly have nowhere near Joe's or Matt's level of expertise in these matters. I do have a kind of a question when Matt mentions that we're not of the size that would warrant bringing it in-house. I'm not really sure why that is. I mean, usually my experience, and I know I'm from a totally different field than he is, the bigger things get, the more chance for unaccountability is created and things like that. But, I mean, my field isn't the same as Matt and Joe's. I would just say that if the sole reason, I mean, when I first started looking at this, I looked at the numbers, just the numbers. As Joe said, and Matt said, that isn't what we should look at, or the only thing that we should look at. I thought, well, boy, it's, $60,000 less than what we're spending a year right now. Isn't it the best thing to do for the users to save them that $60,000, kind of in line with what Kathy said? I know that, there's some reluctance to put more people on staff, but if the end result is saving to the users, provided we can provide the service level, I think it should be considered. Maybe not, we don't have all the information yet, but looking at the recent stuff that I've seen, I think James sent it out to the whole board, where several communities within Livingston County gave a breakdown of their labor costs, their benefit costs, all that. And you look at Hartland Township, and we're on the low end of that. I mean, so we're not being wasteful with the amount of money that we pay people or the benefits that we give them. I think we're being pretty diligent in keeping those costs down. So I think that has to be weighed in on some apprehension of adding more staff. Is we have done a really good job of keeping those costs low and in line with market, I think. So that's kind of my feelings. Certainly willing to go with, if the board feels we need more information on fine with that.
James?
I just want to make sure I understand the board's consensus about what it would like to see next before we continue the discussion. Is it to get a proposal potentially from Oakland County, or is it also to get a proposal, or to request proposals from private contractor operators?
Personally, I think it's both.
Okay.
How many operators are there out there that are...
There's a handful of them, some big, some small. They're out there. We know who they are. So all I was suggesting earlier is that, yes, if it were maybe just one of those, but if we've got to put together an RFP, I mean, that's relatively simple, and we've done a lot of the legwork here. I just didn't want to commit to you that I could turn that around in a quick amount of time. That's additional work we didn't plan for, and we're entering into some other things that are coming up for this season, and I just wanted to fully acknowledge for you not to expect to have that in the next month or two. That I would need some time to go back and make sure that I wasn't committing myself or Public Works to something that we couldn't deliver on.
And my second thought, and we didn't go really into it tonight, and we don't need to, but when we start talking about mowing, plowing, capital improvements, who owns the equipment? Because this is an enterprise fund that owns the water system. It's a separate entity from...
It's not a separate entity.
Well, it's not a separate, but it's got to be, it stands alone.
Right.
Is that fair?
Well, it's funded by...
It's got its own budget.
It's got its own budget, and it's funded by the user fees, but it's still the township.
No, but what I think you're saying is like mowing, we can't use the mowers that we buy for the water.
What is that relationship, without going into all of that, but what does that relationship look like?
It's done all over the place. You rent it. There are standard rates, schedules that actually pretty much everybody uses MDOT's book. It's the Bible on rate, what you charge to rent, everything from a stapler up to a big earth mover. And you just track, DPW guys all over the place are used to tracking how many hours they worked in which fund and how many hours that piece of equipment was used in which fund, and it's all accounted for. It's a pretty standard system.
But again, we have a relationship with HIA and through the maintenance program right now that I think is pretty successful.
Yeah.
So when we start talking about that and we throw out that we're going to start doing mowing the yards and those types of things, I personally believe that we have a good business plan in place for that, and I don't see us building a lot more athletic fields and other things in the near future. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't see any of that in our capital improvement plan and such. So again, that scares me, is to go into that completely different element of maintenance, and especially it's not the actual cost of the labor, but it's the cost of the capital improvements. Between the trucks and the plows and the mowers, it's great the first 3 years, but when they start to break down, then you're on a replacement schedule, and it's a very expensive entity or a program to get into.
And that would all be on a case-by-case basis. Part of the analysis is the cost of investing in equipment necessary to do the same worth the payoff of the benefit. And sometimes the answer is no, and that's where it makes sense to contract.
Okay. Anything else on this topic tonight?
No.
Being none, let's move on to our last item. And Treasurer Horning asked this to be added on it about a month ago. Solicitation ordinance. Kathy, could you maybe just preview your thoughts on why we wanted to bring this to the
Yeah,
table?
just, with spring and summer coming, you're starting to get people going door to door, and a couple of my neighbors mentioned that the people coming through, they didn't know how credentialed they were, or how honest they were, what they were coming through for. And I know, talking with Dave Campbell here, our zoning guy, it's a very hard thing to go out and enforce. But even if you had, if the people in the township had the ordinance in place, they would have some ammunition when somebody came to their door. Did you go get a permit? Do we know you are? And possibly keep it down that way. So they just asked me to bring it forward to the board. A couple of neighbors.
How many people asked you about this?
A couple of neighbors, just, but it's not just a couple of neighbors here. It's, you hear it, they hear it at the counter over there in zoning too. So, just a thought. You still get them too, right?
James, how much time does staff spend on these types of issues in the township?
There have been a handful of complaints, and I think more so in recent, probably in the last year than in previous years. And I think we've all had our own experiences with those things. I could probably speak to it just as much as any of those anecdotal complaints. I've gotten those knocks on my door both places I've lived in the township. So I think we all have a handle on what that level of activity is.
So right now, if somebody's soliciting in our community and we call the township, there's nothing that our ordinance code enforcement officer, anybody could do?
No. Unless they're committing some other type of crime, but that'd be unlikely.
So
How does this work with nonprofits?
It's all on how you draft the ordinance. The sample language you have in front of you is from the MTA. It doesn't necessarily address every...
What about kids who come in and
Right.
soliciting cans?
Right.
And because someone who has gone and on can drives, I've had every emotion of the sort, including those who say, can't you read the front of my door? It says no solicitation. So, I can see this as not being a priority of the township right now.
my concern would be enforcement. So if somebody calls up on a Saturday, we have how many hours does our code enforcement officer work a week? 15 hours a week? To that effect.
15, 20 or so.
We don't have, I guess my concern is, we don't have a way to enforce it. It's
usually on a Saturday or Sunday, unless you're planning on having...
Yeah, generally, when I was a police officer, we used to enforce the solicitation ordinance where I was. That is usually who's the one that gets the call, because it is after hours.
Well, I know that I quite often get calls from people asking us if we have that, if they need to come in. I've gotten letters from Clean Water, or I think it's something like that, an organization notifying me that they're going to be and asking if they need to come in and file with the township. So I know that some people in this arena are aware that those things exist, and it seems to me I remember hearing some rumblings of some there being some problems with people up off of Clyde Road having some solicitors that were they ended up calling the police on or something like that. I seem to remember.
Was this on our citizen survey at all? Solicitation?
I don't recall it being on there, no.
It might be something we would want to ask on our next survey, just to get a pulse, what a problem it is.
Can you go to that internet?
Oh, we could do your mind mixer. We could put that on as a
Yeah.
question.
We could do that.
That would be a great...
That may be a place to start. And then on our Facebook.
Good idea.
Do we just get a pulse of it? Is that, you're just bringing it forward as an opportunity?
Well, yeah, because my one neighbor is an ex-cop. He's an ex-police chief, and he said just to have the ammunition in your pocket, to be able to say to the guy at the door, have you checked in with the township, do you have a permit? And if he says no, you can say, get out of our neighborhood. You don't have to have enforcement. He said if you can just have it in your pocket to say, show me your permit, or go away. And,
Well, just to point out, the fact that one of the complaints we have, in our survey that we spent an hour on before our meeting, was look at the topics of regulation and where we fall. Those who are soliciting are business, they may even be people with businesses in this community. And is that what we want to be? We want to regulate in that fashion?
I don't know, the ones that came to my door from our community.
And to be honest with you, those that are calling, that you mentioned Clean Water calls and says, do I need to get a permit? Those are the ones that you don't have to worry about.
No, I just meant
I'm going to just tell you right now.
it isn't unusual
People
that solicitors do come across that. That's my reason.
How would you like to proceed? Would you like
No, I think...
I like the
just
survey.
give a
I like
little
the
feedback.
survey and start getting some feedback, and if
Getting a
people have
survey would be
questions, could we put something that in our next community life perhaps on that topic as well?
Yeah, we're done for the season, but we can put that in the editorial calendar.
Okay. And James, the capital improvement plan that we went over this evening, is that on our website?
It's in the agenda pack on the website, but it's a draft.
How about the capital improvement plan? Is that on our website?
Same thing, right?
All right, I was thinking, what else did we do tonight that was...
The survey?
Yeah, the survey.
It's in the agenda pack, but yes, we'll put it up with the citizen survey.
Okay.
It'll be there.
Right, okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments this evening?
Move to adjourn.
Support. Okay, we got a motion in a second, but I've got a comment from our manager.
Well, I passed out a document to debrief a little bit more on that survey, if it's okay. If it's not too late. We did some brainstorming internally. We also, with the Chamber of Commerce, offered some feedback as well. We think there's we mentioned a lot of the low-hanging fruit, and I think a lot of those things we can do with existing resources. One of the recurring theme is this communication education element, and because there was a positive response to receiving mail communication, we think there's an opportunity to do a quarterly, one-page, simple, short and sweet enough for to get readership to the brick-and-mortar business community to communicate these things, to tell them about the opportunities to participate in their government, to communicate, the policies and the reasons for them, to educate them about the comparability of our regulations or rates to other communities. There's just, I think, a huge possibility that would make, I think, an effect on what we saw. And while we, are doing that through other channels right now, the newsletter wasn't one that wasn't necessarily on our screen, but as we looked at it, it's relatively inexpensive. I mean, sending out 200 mailers 4 times a year, because postage is usually your barrier, that's a pretty reasonable. So I just wanted to bring that as a possibility if the board wanted to try to invest there. There would be, with the docket of things that we're trying to achieve in other communications, staff time is somewhat limited. I think we can absorb some of it, but what's been proposed is maybe another 5 hours a month to be more aggressive on these things, as well as some information to be a part of. So you got 3 things there that are options to consider. I think we could do a lot with that, and I'd like us to think about it and at least at some point talk about having a follow-up survey within a relatively short amount of time, given that a level of confidence that we can raise those scores in a relatively short amount of time. I don't know if any questions on those things or any thoughts on those ideas.
Are you looking for a motion or consensus, or just to think about it until the next?
Well, if there's, if there's immediate obvious consensus, it'd be good to know, and we can start the ball rolling on implementing them. But if, whatever the board pleases, if it wants to chew on it and put it back on next agenda, or has some immediate thoughts that would be good feedback for us.
I think we should put the whole survey thing on our next agenda. I mean, we haven't had a chance to talk about, we had them present it to us, and we haven't really had a discussion much on what we saw on that. I think that we should put it on as an item at the next meeting, and if the board is inclined to go with this.
I think so too,
make that
James.
decision then.
Okay?
I think we got a lot of questions. We want to make sure that we run the right approach. I think what you have here is that right approach as we go forward. But let's digest what we heard tonight and
Okay.
add it to our next meeting agenda. Was there anything else, James?
That is it, thank you.
I had a motion in a second.
Who was the second?
Joe Claney.
Who was the first?
Larry.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.